Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. The wildfires that have raged in Southern California have killed 28 people, destroyed neighborhoods, and stand to cost billions of dollars in economic damage. Officials have not publicly released the cause of these fires and may not for several weeks or months. And yet, we're already seeing some lawsuits by those affected against entities they hold responsible. Joining us now to talk about these wildfire lawsuits is Bernie Bernheim. He is a lawyer who specializes in wildfire law. He also keeps an office in Altadena, and miraculously, the building was spared. Bernie, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
I just want to start. I mentioned that you keep an office in Altadena, and that structure is okay right now. How are the people of Altadena as you've experienced?
Well, Altadena has been largely wiped off the surface of the earth. It looks like photographs of, I hate to make the comparison, but maybe Hiroshima. There are huge swaths of areas, aerial photographs of just complete, devastation, wiped off. Also, people in Altadena are going to have to deal with something as bad or worse, most likely the next couple of months. The worst, perhaps, is yet to come, and that's the mudslides.
Oh, there is no rest for the weary. And in this environment, you and I were just talking before we started recording, saying how it will take CAL FIRE a little while to release the cause, determine the cause of these blazes. And yet, just a week or so ago, we've seen a lawsuit that alleges that Southern California Edison was negligent in its handling of power lines. So let's talk about this environment. And just for those of us lay people who don't know the law as well as an attorney, how is it possible to not have an official cause of the fire and yet lawsuits against an entity like Southern California Edison?
A lawsuit has to be based on probable cause to bring it. And that can be any type of evidence. It doesn't have to be government evidence. It doesn't have to be, an official report. You can sue over a traffic accident before the police make a determination of who was at fault. You can. There are all kinds of evidence besides government official evidence, and in fact, even if the government determined that it had a different cause, you can still bring a lawsuit if you have evidence. You can disagree with a government report. That happens all the time. So you don't need the government report. And in the Woolsey fire in Malibu, it took over a year for CAL FIRE to issue its report. Over a year. Because they do an extraordinarily thorough job. They witness interviews. They have to, they're an investigative agency. So they have to make appointments with witnesses, interview those witnesses, find out from those witnesses who else may have seen it. So there are more witnesses, and they interview those witnesses. They go out to the site. They make all kinds of measurements. They hire experts or bring in their own in-house experts to do reports that are then amalgamated into their final report. Then the report ends up being 100 pages long, and as a 100-page long government report with illustrations and witness interviews and so forth. That doesn't happen in a few weeks or months.
So we saw this initial lawsuit against Southern California Edison. What is the precedent here? Have they been sued in other fires? And what types of lawsuits might we see in the coming days, weeks, and months?
So you'll see suits against them for negligence, for inverse condemnation, trespass, all sorts of legal theories, but basically saying they're responsible and have to pay. The Palisades fire, on the other hand, there really is no consensus yet as to the cause. As to Southern California Edison, they caused the devastating Woolsey fire of November 8th, 28 in Malibu. Cases. The year before, they caused the Thomas fire in Ventura County, which not only burned a lot of structures, but resulted in massive mudslides, which we expect to see here in Altadena as well.
What's your prediction for how many of these lawsuits we could see in the coming days and weeks?
Well, it kind of depends how you define lawsuit. Most of the lawyers that do this, they don't file for each family one complaint with one case number. First of all, the filing fees, are like $700. So what they do instead is as we collect clients, as clients come to us, we list the client and a lawsuit, like maybe filing one every 2 weeks, a complaint, and it will have whatever clients we've signed up in that 2-week period. So you could count by the number of complaints, but that really isn't a very useful metric. The useful metric is how many families or businesses, both families and businesses, are suing. And I expect the number in Altadena families and businesses will probably exceed 5,000 who will be suing. Maybe a lot more than that.
And where does this litigation fit within the context of general disaster relief? If you are, let's start with the homeowner, the family, and then we can move to small business. But if you are a family who has lost everything in this fire, is the call to the lawyer the first step? Is it, if they haven't contacted FEMA yet, what's the order of operations here?
The first step is to call your fire insurance company, if you have one. We have clients who didn't have fire insurance, believe it or not. But if you haven't, call them, get them moving. That's your first and quickest way to start getting some money in your bank account, including for particularly your alternative living expenses, or ALE as it's called, or sometimes loss of use, meaning you need to pay hotel bills. You need to pay for the additional cost of eating out in restaurants.
So that was my question on behalf of homeowners. Let's talk about small business owners. We've of course seen the footage of Altadena, full businesses entirely gone. What is the advice for someone who has lost a business in a fire?
Well, again, the first order, and it can be big businesses. I mean, yes, you've got supermarkets that have burned, and you have huge corporations that have losses as well. But again, call your insurance company. Your business should have not only coverage for property loss, but for business interruption, meaning your loss of profits. Now that takes a while, and you really do need a lawyer for calculating your business losses. We complicated issues in terms of suing Edison. Even you may need the assistance of a lawyer or a public insurance adjuster to calculate business loss, even for your first party insurer. They will try to lowball you. They'll say your business wasn't profitable. It wasn't, the fire did you a favor by burning down your business because you were losing money. And they play all kinds of games when it comes to numbers calculations for profitability.
So whether you are a small business or a homeowner, your first call should be the insurance companies. What else are you hearing from folks in Altadena? What are their questions about who next to contact or what else to do?
Well, they want to know if they're underinsured or they don't have insurance, what can they do? And the answer is they need to sue Southern California Edison. And the sooner they do that, the sooner they'll get recovery. It's a long process, but there's a line essentially you have to get into. You have to queue up. And the first will get fed first.
I had seen something similar about FEMA relief. So effectively, all forms of financial relief right now are get in line, do it as soon as possible. The sooner the better. Is that what it all boils down to?
Yes.
And for you as an attorney, how are you gearing up for the next few weeks, months, years? This feels like the aftermath from a litigation perspective could really go on for quite some time.
Yeah, the litigation will go on for years. In fact, what typically happens is Southern California Edison will first settle with the municipal entities, counties, and state entities that are going to sue them, okay, for loss to their property as well as the cost of dealing with the fire. Then also the insurance companies will be suing Edison to recover the money that they've paid out to homeowners and businesses. And then a deal will be made between Edison and the insurance companies, where Edison will probably pay something like 70 to 80 cents on the dollar of what the insurance companies paid out. Then Edison will take the position that Edison's not going to settle with you until they know how much insurance you've received. Now, that's a bit of in my view, a bit of a controversial interpretation of the law. I have a legal theory that Edison is not entitled to an offset and has to, deal with your claim without knowing what the insurance payout is. But I haven't fully pursued that yet because in prior fires it worked out okay for folks. But basically, you've got to wait of like a year and a half to get that money. And that's why it's so important to, number one, get in line, and number two, get your insurance claim resolved. Because Edison's position will be, so your insurance claim's resolved, we don't know how much insurance money you've gotten, therefore we don't know how much.
Now, we've been talking about Southern California Edison a lot here and recognizing that there is historical precedent for that company being involved in fires. But as you look at the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire, there's still a lot of questions that remain over the cause. Are there other entities who you suspect will be the subject of lawsuits?
As to the Altadena Eaton fire, I don't think so. Edison probably caused it. They're a very viable defendant. They have not only their own money, but there's a $20 billion state fund that backs them up. And plus, their parent, Edison International, has vast resources. But as to the Palisades fire, which may, in dollar terms at least, have been more destructive because of the nature of the very, very expensive mansions that were there is no definitive cause of the fire, and the lawsuits that have been filed there have been against the Department of Water and Power of the City of Los Angeles for mismanaging the water supply. That's not the strongest case in the world necessarily, at least it looks like right now. But there could be just a political decision, in my view, made by the government entities like the City of Los Angeles to use those lawsuits against DWE as a vehicle to help people. I think, for example, one of the big technical legal problems with that case by the Palisades victims is something called sovereign immunity, that there are statutes that give the city and the DWP immunity from suing the water supply in fires. But on the other hand, if they assert immunity and say, well, we can't be sued because we're protected, but we screwed up, but you can't sue us. That could result in massive political repercussions, including recall mayor, recall the entire city council, and they may just want to get money to the people and use those lawsuits as a vehicle, even though in a technical sense they might not have merit. Sovereign immunity is something that has to be asserted by the city. They would have to say, yes, we're relying on that, and maybe they won't. We don't know. One thing we do know, for example, in the Lahaina fire in Hawaii, in Maui, the state of Hawaii ended up paying the majority of the money that went back. But the state didn't really have any particular liability. They just did it.
That's really interesting. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about the worsening of certain environments that have allowed for these fires, right? We see climate change, we see these winds, we see the arid conditions. Do you expect to be busier in the coming years as a wildfire attorney?
It's hard to say because most of these fires are ignited by power companies. They have the ability, if they spend the money, to prevent them completely. They just have to maintain their equipment better. They can start putting lines underground where they can't cause fires. I mean, that's the case in Europe and even in many of LA County. You don't go to Europe and see 100-year-old wooden power poles holding things in the air. Not in Western Europe. You don't see anything. Go to Germany, you're not going to see that because they're all buried. The power companies just don't want to spend the money to do things that are prevent these completely. So, but if they do, then you won't see as many fires, regardless of the environmental issue. I mean, we have the ability to prevent these fires largely.
We have the ability to prevent these fires. That is both hopeful but also enraging, seeing the devastation that has happened.
It comes down to profit. And also, don't forget, a utility, I mean, look, they don't like paying out this money, but they can always raise rates, and that's what they do to make up for it. And then, so basically, the cost gets put back not on the shareholders of these public utilities, but on the ratepayers, the ordinary people that buy electricity.
As you look at the work that lies ahead of you, as you look at the devastation in Altadena, what are your final thoughts here? How will you be spending the next few weeks and days and months, and what should we know about how you're thinking about the future?
The first thing is to do what we're doing here, which is to get information out to people that there is a plan you can follow, and that includes allowing us to file litigation. So we're step one from my firm is to get the word out that how we brought back a tremendous amount of money from Edison and the Malibu. I did a ratio calculation, and what I determined was that for every dollar that people received from their insurance company for their fire damage, we added another $2.5 on average from Edison. And so it's important to get lawyers on board and get this started. So the sooner you do that, the sooner you can get this additional money. Because the money you get from your insurance company is not going to be enough to rebuild you to like, kind, and quality, nor to compensate you for the PTSD, the trauma, all of these things. Insurance companies, their policies are limited. They have, not only are you limited by the cap on liability, the general $1 million I'm insured for, there are sub-limits within the insurance policies. For example, for trees and bushes, there are usually ridiculously low sub-limits, like, $500 a tree. Now, if you lost 10 mature trees, to bring in those 10 mature trees, something equivalent would be, could be, well, if you have 10, it could be $50, $75, $100,000, but they're going to give you $750 a tree. And because that's the sublimit. Same with things like jewelry. A lot of people don't separately schedule their jewelry or their art. So, you might be limited. You may have lost $100,000 in jewelry and be limited to, $2,500 within the insurance policy. There's also a 2-year limit on additional living expense generally. After that, you're on your own for your bills, your alternative rental and so on. And it may take 4, 5, 6 years for you to have a house to move. So where does this additional money have to come from? It has to come from the folks that started the fire, which is where we come in. So very, very important to get full recovery, to retain counsel, to litigate. But, on the other hand, there's not a lot you have to do once you retain counsel. I mean, our firm, most other firms, we advance all litigation expenses. There's no risk. If something happens, there is no recovery. I doubt that, but if that happened, you don't have to pay anything. And, we do the legwork. We retain the experts. We contact you, for information, but there may be some inspections, but basically we do the work.
Bernie Bernheim, thank you for doing the work and also for coming on and sharing your insight with us. We so appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.